few benefits. Data security isn't one of them. Until now. Presenting CloutHub Meets, a safe, simple, and secure meeting platform that puts you in complete control of your data. With HIPAA-compliant paid and free plans, cheaper than Zoom, there are no apps to install, no saved data, and no big brother tracking your every move. Stop worrying if the services you use are using you, and sign up for CloutHub Meets today at clouthubmeets.com.
Way we've ever had on this channel. We're giving one of you this fully customized Chevrolet Silverado Trail Boss Z71 thanks to Payne Safari. America's not as safe as it once was and is getting crazier by the day with open borders and ridiculous policies that let criminals walk away scot-free after committing crimes, which is why always having a way to defend yourself is a good idea. Guns may be the best solution for taking out bad guys, but not everybody can or wants to carry a gun. That's where this incredible flashlight comes into play. It's called the Shockwave Torch by Payne Safari, and this innocent looking and super bright light is anything but harmless. It's so powerful, it has this built-in safety and only charges when plugged into the wall. But press this button and it will discharge a brutal stun gun that will turn a 350-pound man into a crying baby. Equip you and your loved ones with a Shockwave Torch. These are a must-have for anyone, from moms, dads, daughters, you name it. It's the simplest thing that you could ever own to help boost your chances so some dirty thug doesn't turn you into a victim. Get an exclusive discount and extra entries this week only when you use our link below. Don't wait, because this giveaway ends in a few weeks.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Know Your Rights today by Vax Choice with Dawn Uballe and Chris Pazzula. How are you ladies doing today?
Just great. Got the dogs there.
Well, you, as our viewers may have noticed, we had some new ad today at the beginning of the show with CloutHub Meets and our friends over at Payne Safari. And if you go click the links that are in the description, you can get that flashlight that was shown in the video, and then later we're going to show another ad for a holster, and you want to make sure to register for that truck. Lord knows that vehicle prices are sky high right now. You could probably use a free truck, right?
No kidding.
Well, I'm excited to learn about the WHO Treaty from you ladies today, so I'm going to go ahead and step aside, and I'll come back at the end.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks, Melissa.
How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
Late this morning, so it's like, okay, settle down.
Yeah. And we haven't chatted about this before today, so it'll be a really organic conversation. But, you know, that's the WHO Treaty, and I'll be perfectly honest, it's not really been on my radar for multiple reasons. You know, what are your general thoughts on it? Has it been something you've been following and watching, or?
Yeah, actually, it has been something I've been following and watching since last year. And yeah, because I mean, it was definitely, you could see where they were going to make a power play to try to, you know, again, use COVID. How many times has COVID been used to pour more power to government agencies? And they're not even a government agency. We're talking, you know, an unelected, again, the elite, you know, level bureaucrats of these, you know, quote unquote non-profits or whatever that are basically ruling the world without without, you know, us actually giving them permission to do so or electing them. So yeah. It was definitely, you could see where it was, you know, that they were going to try to take control, where they were going to be able to, you know, declare what was a state of emergency, including a climate emergency. I mean, it wasn't just covering health, right? We're talking about the World Health Organization, right? But it was well beyond that. And so, yeah, it came on my radar last year. And there were some pushes from many different countries to try to, you know, get their governments to pull out.
And they've been negotiating this for 2 years, over 2 years.
Yeah.
I think it's going on 2.5 years, if I'm doing my math right. And honestly, I think, yes, I've paid attention to it throughout that process. But I've just kind of come to that personal conclusion that I don't think another pandemic is what they're going to try. I think they have been trying, and everybody's like laughing at them.
Right.
So I just
gonna try. I don't think
it's going to get traction, and I'm
building up for it. Now I just saw that what did I see last night? It was another extension of they found H1N1 in worms, and they found it in milk. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, there's no way we know that it's possible for this thing to mutate, for any kind of virus to mutate and survive in as many different environments that they're claiming that it does. I mean, but they're moving in that direction. So I still think they might try.
Well, of course, I think they have tried, but I think we can look at what's happened since COVID, and none of it's been successful. That's kind of what I'm looking at.
Yeah, the monkeypox wasn't.
Yes,
there's several things. I agree.
And I've described this before, but I just remember so vividly everything that was happening up until the declaration of the pandemic in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, everybody was glued to every piece of news, mainstream news.
Right.
And I remember walking into coworkers' offices and seeing one of their computer monitors with the Johns Hopkins map pulled up, and it was just black with red flashing. And so, I mean, that's going to cause angst and fear.
Right.
And it was like everybody was glued to it. Everybody was paying attention to it. And so everybody was primed to be, manipulated and locked in the barrel. And I just haven't seen that. I haven't seen that happening in the general public.
Right.
They're trying to, oh, bird flu here, this here. Yeah.
But I think they're seeding it, you know what I mean? Because I think they know that now they've got to go about it a little bit differently if they're going to get people's attention, right? I mean, before it was sort of, it hit us all from out of the blue. And I mean, I didn't even see, none of us saw it coming. Like, I didn't, and maybe people did. I haven't had TV in over 5 years. So I get all my news from, watching CNN, or not CNN, but I don't watch CNN, but from the computer, snippets, and I'll go and look at a website of a thing, but I don't actually sit and watch news or anything like that. And so maybe it did, but I mean, I can remember thinking, what the heck is going on? And it was sort of like, watching an accident where it's going to be horrible, but you can't look away. And I was just more like, I was completely flabbergasted from the get-go, because I could see so clearly what was happening. And I was just like, why isn't everybody seeing this for what it is? Like, I don't know. It was pretty.
Well, you weren't being programmed. I mean, let's be clear.
Yeah.
The media was programming people for those responses.
Yeah. And the fear, I mean, you could see the propaganda. And part of this was when I worked for the government, and for the Forest Service, we dealt with, I think I said this long ago when we first started the podcast, on my background, but, we were dealing with really radical environmental groups, Earth Liberation Front, the ones that are, that'll do damage and blow things up and that kind of thing. And we had a task force that was basically formed to try to get this one timber sale out. And we were taught that the task force was basically taught how to recognize propaganda and then how to combat it, to some degree, because we were trying to combat the narrative that they were trying to, that they were painting. And so I don't know, maybe that's just, I learned that lesson well, I guess. So, I mean, I can spot propaganda from a mile away.
Don't we think there's maybe an issue with people thinking propaganda even exists, or that they would use propaganda?
Absolutely.
So if you don't think there is propaganda, you're going to fall for it.
Yeah.
But to kind of get back to the WHO treaty, and I haven't read it line for line, but I've skimmed through it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's I've read so many things online and in chat groups, and people who aren't attorneys or who aren't necessarily educated or don't necessarily care about the concept. or procedure for something like this to go into effect. I think it's worth discussing that, because I saw a lot of people making statements online that I was like, well, that's not how that works. You know,
right.
And we've said all the things we've said on this show about our Constitution, and you know, we definitely don't think it's being honored in a lot of ways.
No.
But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? Our Constitution still exists. It's still, you know, as far as we know, in force.
Yeah.
And one of the,
it's still there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still there. So the pandemic, the WHO document is they're trying to get it passed as a treaty, as an international treaty. And the way those work is once they approve a draft, that's sent to every country that they want to be a member of it. And then that country has to ratify it, approve it, according to whatever that country's procedures are.
Right.
In the United States, that's a supermajority of the Senate, 2/3 of the Senate have to approve it, and then signed by the president for it to be enforceable.
Right.
And, you know, even if it does become an enforceable treaty, it doesn't override our Constitution. Constitution is still the supreme law of the land.
Yeah, but it certainly was going to try, because it did basically cede sovereignty of any nation that signed on to that.
I don't think it does. And actually,
the original one does. They've changed. It's been watered down. Now they've had enough resistance, but the original language, which is not what most people are reading now, because they have had to, like I said, negotiate, and there's been enough pushback.
Exactly. And I think that's what people need to be aware of. And we can provide the link with the show. The most current version of it was from March of this year. But yes, I don't disagree that there were, but again, is that even enforceable? That's against the Constitution.
That's just it, though. I mean, that's what makes this, I guess, so scary for me is, one, can we even do a treaty with a non-government agents? Like,
no, it's not us. The WHO is not a party to it. That's another.
They're just, okay. Well, but it does give them the authority. It gives the WHO the authority.
Well,
so
I think we need to review the current draft, though, too. As I was looking through it, you look at each article and it talks about the parties. Well, like you just said, the WHO is not a party to this. They are simply an organization that's there to, and believe me, I don't trust the WHO. I don't think this is necessarily a good thing. Well, let me rephrase. I don't think it's a good thing, because I think that pandemic was not real. Like the threat was not there. The shots they put into everybody were not.
And I think horrible. You know, the WHO may not be a party, but it's recognizing that the WHO is fundamental to strength. I mean, it cedes authority to the WHO. You have to read the current version, though, because it talks about the parties, and I'm not sure there's a section, and maybe this is what's been watered down in it. Right.
The section
recognizing that the World Health Organization is fundamental to strengthening pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. That's the first line of it, right?
And directing and coordinating authority on it. Yeah. I'm not saying it can't be used for bad things. Don't get me wrong. But what I will tell you is interesting, though, too, is so that's one of the concerns, right? Because I was reading an article about it, too, that's some of the concerns from the U.S.'s perspective, because one of the things they say they're concerned about is, well, there were countries that were left out in the cold because they don't have resources and preparedness. So we need to make sure everybody's equal. And so there are actually congressional members who are saying, well, is the U.S. going to have to foot the bill if there's another pandemic?
Right.
You know, are we going to have to pay? I mean,
well, and that's in, Melissa, go back up. That's in bullet point number 2, Dawn, where they say they're going to recall the Constitution of the WHO, which states that basically it's a non-discrimination clause. The current Constitution which states that enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of a fundamental right of every human without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic or social conditions. They're recalling that so that they can make all of those things a factor, exactly what you're saying, a factor in the next pandemic, that it's not going to be equal across the board. It's going to be based on, right, resources going where they feel that they're not going based on all of those other, distinctions. So yeah, I mean, the whole thing.
Well, I will tell you though, one of the other concerns that I think is what is going to make it not pass is if you read it, there are other provisions that talk about the sharing of information and the sharing of intellectual property.
Right.
And guess who would have major concerns with that?
Right.
Not governments.
Right.
Big pharma.
Right.
So right then and there, I feel like big pharma's going, whoa, whoa, whoa. And if they are,
they may not, because I mean, as long as they get paid, they're not really going to care who has the information, right? I mean, if you're going to follow
information, no, but intellectual property, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if you share intellectual property, you're sharing your money.
That's true.
And they're not going to want to share. They're not going to want to share that.
Yeah,
you're right.
That goes into patents and different things like that. That's a good point.
Yeah, their motivation is definitely the money.
Yeah, for sure. But what's scary about this to me is we all know how dysfunctional our government is. Yes, this may not be enforceable, but is our government going to push back?
No, for sure.
They're not going to stand up for us. That's what's scary, is they're turning us over to, this treaty, and then they're going to sit back and say, well, gee, we've got nothing we can do.
Yeah, exactly. And let's reiterate that point too. And that's part of what we do with this broadcast is educate people, like, know your rights, right? So back with COVID and stuff, it used to drive me nuts if I went flying and they would say federal law requires that you wear a mask. There is no federal law. There is not one single federal law.
Right. Exactly.
That requires me to wear a mask.
Right.
But people just heard that and bought it.
And went along.
And enforced it. And you were trying to kill, grandma if you didn't abide by that.
Yeah.
So point well taken. If this gets and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this today in the first place, because it was like people have these understandings of it, even on what we would say our side, even on the conservative side or the alternative media side, they're almost making too big of a deal of it in my mind, and that's helping paint the picture that this has more authority than it has.
Right.
And I think that's need to be the position we start from, is it can't override our Constitution. And that's what we behave on, right? Don't behave
that the narrative is going to be, the narrative is going to be that the media pushes that, we're not good neighbors or we're not good whatever. Yeah. We don't. So
we're gonna take a quick break. We have another that other ad for you that Melissa was sharing with us.
We've ever had on this channel. We're giving one of you this fully customized Chevrolet Silverado Trail Boss Z71 thanks to Vanish. I love this thing. The Vanish holster is the most comfortable holster I've ever worn. It's made with premium materials that enhance all-day carry for the everyday American. This is an incredibly versatile holster that works with 99% of modern handguns, allows you to carry 2 extra magazines, and can be worn in just about any configuration you can imagine. To enter, all you have to do is click the link in the description and get yourself the most comfortable holster you've ever worn with a money-back guarantee. And Vanish will hook you up. They're knocking $50 off the retail price for anyone who buys using our special link below. Get an exclusive discount and extra entries this week only when you use our link below. Don't wait, because this giveaway ends in a few weeks.
Wow.
Sweet looking truck.
Right? Good looking truck. Well, I was just thinking that flashlight looked really cool. At the beginning, I was like, oh, my husband like that. And my husband is, he's a gun and holster collector. So
new holster. So.
That looks like an interesting holster too. but yeah, kind of where we left off.
That the media is going to be pushing, they're going to control. The thing is, they're going to control the narrative, right? And that's just so. I mean, I think that's a lot less. I mean, we're starting to control or we're starting not control the narrative, but let's just say that the public is waking up and the alternative media is waking up, that we're thwarting the narrative a lot more quickly than what we were able to do. Anybody was able to do during COVID. So. So it's a matter of, again, like you're saying, knowing what this really is and trying to not allow that narrative that, one, this is a good thing, and two, that, it doesn't do anything, for our national sovereignty. There's no downside to this. We just need to be a good global player in this whole thing.
And that's what it looks like on its face, right? Like, oh, let's just cooperate and work together because we could be caught off guard at any, at any moment. But I think I saw a reference to Article 24. Let me see if I can find it. That's on page 24 and 25, Melissa. But it was something about, it was specific language that it does not cede authority to the WHO. So again, like you were saying,
that's changed.
I didn't have time to look at previous versions, and maybe that's an updated version, but I think
it is. Yeah, it's an updated version. I'm going to full screen here so I can see
24. I saw it referenced in an article. Let me see if I can. And of course,
well, and there has been, our Congress has, I don't know what the numbers were, but there was something that came out of Congress that said they did not support this. I don't know if it's the majority that we need. You know what I mean? I don't know if it's enough for us to,
right. I mean,
but
we know they're voting, 90 to 10, 90% of them are voting to continue to send our tax dollars to support other countries. So, we definitely cannot rely on our.
Well, is that it? That number 3 there, right before Article 5? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah. So they cannot mandate or impose any law. Yep, right there. So of course, we're trying to kind of pre-educate now in case it does get adopted. But I think that's the other part that we need to make sure is clear. So they've been talking about it, and everybody had May 27th. They're going to vote on it. Well, apparently they didn't even have enough support to vote on it. I don't think they even voted on it.
Yeah.
On Monday. And they're continuing to have meetings. Like, don't get me wrong. It didn't just die and go by the wayside.
Right.
But my understanding is enough countries pushed back and said, we're not going to support it. And it's those things that we've said before that are just legitimate, like the U.S. has legitimate financial concerns. Like, what are we going to have? And even the language of it does imply that pharmaceutical companies would have financial obligations because they would be the ones, in essence, producing the pandemic treatments, right? If there were treatments or medicines, either they would, I don't know if they would have to chip in money or if they would have to give away product. You know what I mean? Something would hit them in the pocketbooks. And that, to me, right there, I was like, ding, ding, ding. That may be the thing that that kills this over anything else.
Yeah. That is new from what I know of what I read last year. And I have to admit, I have not thoroughly read it's been iterations of this, so I was not familiar. So that is definitely new. But here's my concern, just like any other piece of legislation, the switch, and so you think it's one thing, and boom, the next thing you know, that's on the floor being voted has had this little sentence removed, this tweaked, and it's. So do I trust any politician? I don't care whether they're not or government. Do I trust any bureaucrat? And no, I do not.
No. And it even says this is the latest publicly available version. So to me, that implies there's other working versions that they're not going to share with us.
Yep.
So if it does, and here's the thing, we can't call up the WHO, right? And I mean, we probably, I don't know, we might be able to. I've never looked into it, but they're not going to listen to us. So it's not something we can really do anything about right now, I don't think. But other than, we can contact our elected representatives.
Right.
And
here, here under Article 26 that Melissa just brought up, the interpretation application shall be guided by the WHO or by the UN, Charter of the UN, and then Constitution of the WHO. But there again, they're saying they're recalling their Constitution. Do we know what that new Constitution looks like? Probably not. I bet you there's not a draft of that. They're recalling it. So what does that mean? Right. And that's, that just comes down to being able to read between the lines of all this stuff. And that's where that just takes experience. You've got to understand how these negotiations and how these things read. Basically it's not even so much what's said, but what's not said.
Right. For sure.
Because if it's not said, it doesn't mean it can't be done. Right. And that's why I would say, and I got this, this was such a lesson with regard to the, to the animal rights legislation I've been fighting for the last, 15 years. Well, it doesn't say that, but it doesn't not say that. So it can be interpreted to say that.
Right.
I don't trust that anybody's not going to interpret it, in a way that's not written, because if it's not written here, you can interpret this anyway. And then you're in court trying to, do this, that, or the other thing. I mean, it's so nefarious how they've twisted our processes so much. And this is, to me, is just another bastardization of, trying to make it seem like we as a country, even not even we the people, but because we know that we the people don't have any power at this point, but hopefully we'll right that ship. But I mean, the countries even have any real say in it. I mean, it's just so, the process is so broken. I mean, at this point, it's so disheartening to see how far we are from where we should be. And
for sure.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first one to admit, even if this appears innocuous on its face,
right,
don't trust it,
Yeah, exactly. What doesn't it say? Just think of that. What doesn't it say? What does it not allow? What does it allow? What does it not allow? Right? Because if it's not specifically prohibited in here, somebody's going to interpret it to say, oh, it doesn't say we can't do it.
Yep.
Therefore, we're gonna, right? Where does it say we can't do that? Why can't it say, right? So I always look at these things through the lens of what is it not saying, more so than I'm even looking at what it does say.
Right. And it's sad that we've had to become that cynical, but
absolutely
we have had to. And words. So this is what you got to think of. Words are ambiguous,
right?
Nature.
Yeah.
As a lawyer and you as somebody who works in the legal profession, we are very careful with our words, or attempt to be very careful with our words.
Right.
We know they have meaning. And, every legal document we write,
right.
It's not just a casual, writing of something.
Right.
But how often is something we've said or written misinterpreted, or not even necessarily misinterpreted, but interpreted in a way other than what we intended or thought.
Right.
Like that happens all the time.
Right. Right. Even well, I trying to realize that it's lawyers that are writing these documents, right? And they know words have meaning. So, and they know that most people aren't educated in what those words really mean legally, right? Or again, this interpretation, or what the interpretation has been in case law. I mean, they take advantage of our ignorance, which is why we're, saying get educated, and so that you're not you're not allowing these folks to fool us, and to get away with what they're trying to get away with. I mean, it's criminal what they're trying to get away with and what they are getting away with. But I mean, it's one of those things where, man, jet going by. it's just the same as, you know, like I can't sell eggs in the state because they passed legislation that was supposed to be, that's what it was lobbied for, commercial egg producers, because they didn't want the big bad egg producers from California coming over here because they shut them down in California. But it doesn't say, and so now it applies to everyone that's got a chicken coop in their backyard because it doesn't say specifically, right? So they will interpret it how the government wants more power. I don't care if it's a local, you know, your state government, your local government, they are never going to give up an opportunity to take more power and to control things more, right? Keeps them relevant, if nothing else. But yeah, so I'm just so skeptical. If you'd have told me, I would have been this skeptical. I mean, I've always been somewhat skeptical, but if you'd have told me this distrustful, I'd be telling you you're nuts, but I really am. And that just goes my experience of working with the government. And, you know, now looking back at that experience and knowing what I know now.
Yeah.
But the piece was there, you know, but yeah.
What is that quote that is attributed to Ronald Reagan, you know, the 7 or however many words.
You know, most dangerous words.
Yeah. I'm from the government. I'm here to help.
I'm here to help. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They're never there to help.
So, I mean, it is really sad that you can't. I mean, and you really, truly. That's not to say there aren't people with integrity that do work for the government, but as a whole, they're not out for. They're not out for helping people.
Right.
They're not, you know, but it seems like their primary motivation is to catch people, you know, doing you know, unlawful things.
Exactly. There's a book out there. I think we mentioned it last week. I might have mentioned it last week on the show with Mindy, but there's a book out there. It's years old called Overcriminalization. And it is about how we basically can't move a muscle these days without breaking some sort of law, and how overcriminalized everything has become. And I think we also mentioned this last week because we were talking about the things that are coming in the farm bill with the new, you know, animal rights stuff, but they, and these NGOs, right, are push for you've got to be, you know, you've got to wield the hammer over their head. You can't be their friend as the government and come in and actually say, hey, if you change this and this and this and this and this, you'll be in compliance. No, you've got to go in there with, you know, change this and we're going to beat you up, you know, for it. And we're going to charge you for it right off the bat. We're going to do whatever. I mean, it's not the relationship with the government. I mean, how many stories do we know where whether it's state or, you know, local? I just saw, Dawn, that in Texas, that I just see where they came into somebody's, he raised deer, and they slaughtered his entire herd, saying there was apparently no evidence of it, but they slaughtered his entire herd because they said that chronic wasting syndrome in the deer.
I know what that is.
It is actually, what is it?
It's to look that one up.
Human disease. I'm trying to remember what it was. What it is. Chronic wasting disease is very it's similar or the same of, I can't remember what disease in humans, but they basically just waste away, and it's some sort of, you know, it's a contagious type of thing that I think probably has been introduced in the herds again. They create these crises so they can come in and say we have the solution. But I mean, chronic wasting syndrome has been a thing for a while, and they'll go in and call a wild herd. But this guy had a ranch where it was very controlled. Again, you're talking, he was highly regulated with regard to bio. I mean, that's what people don't understand with all the agriculture stuff. They're very highly regulated with regard to biohazards and, you know, what they're allowed to do with regard to keeping things clean. And it was on Doc Pete's. I saw it on Doc Pete's Telegram channel. He was standing there watching all these dead deer.
Oh, that's awful.
And they had gone into this guy's ranch and just killed his entire herd.
Yeah.
So they're not there to help you. They're there to wield an axe over your head.
At best, right? At best. At worst, it's more nefarious than that even, right?
Exactly.
Like we've talked about this, like the whole bird flu thing. Like I said, I'm not so sure that they're going to get the public to go along with another pandemic, but if they can use it to disrupt our food supply,
Well, and they're going to convince people it's in the food. Like I said, now it's in the milk, and now it's, they're going to convince, they're going to scare people with the fact that, it's going to affect your food supply. And now we've got to control your food supply. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep. Well, and they'll diminish it, right? Like, and that's biblical. Famine is biblical. In the end times, and as God, part of God's judgment, I believe, and that's not to say that that won't happen.
Right.
At their hands.
There we go. There's their out. Definition might need to be adjusted following the finalization of the negotiation on the scope of digital sequester. Yeah, all this stuff. So yeah, there we go. We're going to give ourselves a little bit of out there so we can change the definition after everybody thinks they know what it is.
Yeah, pathogen with pandemic potential. Like, what does that even mean?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't know, the language of the climate stuff might have been taken out of here, because that was a big one too, because they could use this to declare climate emergency.
I remembered. I do remember that.
What does that have to do, right? I mean, so how does the WHO get in the middle of a climate, quote unquote climate? Not that I believe that there's anything, that whole thing is so fabricated, but
yeah, for sure. I had another thought. I can't remember what I was going to say, but maybe it'll come back to me here in a second.
But I always tell people, in any conversation you get into with anybody, and there's so many things to get contentious these days very quickly, but stop and say, okay, let's just make sure we're defining things the same way, right? Before we continue the conversation, because if we're not defining things the same way, if you're not coming from the same starting point, you're never going to agree. And that's not to say you have to agree, but you're never going to be able to.
It's not going to be productive.
Right. Exactly. It's not going to be a productive discussion. And that's, again, goes back to my experience with the animal rights folks when, my very first experience with them was, quote unquote puppy mill bill. And they came up afterwards and wagged their finger in my face and said, anyone that produces a single kitten or puppy is a mill. And I went, whoa, wait a minute. We are not talking the same language here. Right?
No.
Sure, you're defining things. I mean, like we know, they changed the definition of vaccine. They will change the the definition of whatever they want to make it suit their narrative. We need to not buy into that. We need to say no. Right? The language means this, and I'm not going to cede the definition, or I'm not going to cede. Not going to buy your version of that word and that definition. Right?
Exactly.
And that makes the conversation a whole different one, but it's one where you don't have to, stand there and beat your head against the wall thinking that you're both coming from the same place and you're not even there, right?
Yeah, this section that we have pulled up right now, I remember reading previous versions of this, and they had tinkered with this.
Yeah.
So I think they did end up probably having to go back to this, full respect for the dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms of all persons. The sovereign right of states to adopt, legislate,
right,
in their jurisdiction. Whatever, in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations, which again, we're part of that, right? So again, it doesn't override Constitution in theory on paper,
right?
So I think there were, like, to Chris's point, and I do remember reading previous versions of it that were much scarier, and I think even with this version, which I think we can agree is watered down, it still didn't pass.
Right.
It still hasn't passed.
But see, number 3, equity as the goal and outcome, equity of outcome. How do you, some of this stuff too, number 2, full respect for the dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms of all person, and the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health. Who gets to define that?
Right.
So people don't understand this is still so much interpretation. And, the higher you go up the food chain, meaning the bureaucracy, the more nebulous and the more, when you realize how vague some of this stuff is written,
well, and
it sounds good. But
exactly. And honestly, because you're looking at this, from a purely legal perspective, this is a contract.
Right. Exactly.
And, from that perspective, it actually probably is a very horribly written contract for that exact reason, because
exactly.
What does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And of
Right.
course, that principle section, I would argue that is like the whereas section.
Right.
They're not really enforceable terms in a contract, but what it's saying is, hey, here's all the things we're trying to abide by, or we're drafting this under.
Right.
But you don't go and try to enforce the whereas.
Right.
Well,
the whereas is the assumption that they're building this on.
Yes.
And those drive me nuts, because I see some of those, especially at the local level. Whereas, animal cruelty is a big thing.
Right.
Is it really? I mean, like, they're doing all these on the assumptions based, and those whereases are usually formed by the lobbying groups, the special interest groups. That's where those whereases come from. Is there even a section in here on definitions? Do they even define this?
That Article 1 that we were looking at earlier.
Okay.
Definitions, I believe. Oh, maybe we weren't looking at it, but I think Article 1. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
Look at that one. PABS. Publicly accessible databases that meet and agree to legally binding terms of reference. It is like, what is
you know what that means at all? I mean, I don't even know what that means when I read it. I'm like, what?
One health approach. Like that's an issue right there, right? Because that was our whole thing. That was, where we started as a law firm, disabled rights advocates.
Right.
Because we had, people working for companies or trying to get into schools saying, hey, we have health conditions. We can't take these shots.
Yeah.
And, kind of started from there. And so the one health approach, no, there is not one health approach.
There's your climate change and your green new agenda right at the bottom of that. I mean, that one, that number, that E. Go back up, Melissa. E. There's your
recognizes the health
right
of
again.
Humans, domestic and wild animals, plants, and the wider environment,
including ecosystems. So there's your tie-in to. So it
so now I want to find out, where is that term in the
right?
Let's see if we can find it. One health.
It's all their agenda's all is still in here. Don't fool yourself. It may seem watered down, but I have had enough experience now in legislative, basically legislation, that I don't trust it all. Melissa says she found them.
Article 5. Article 5 is the one on page 6.
Reaffirming the importance of multisectoral collaboration at national, regional, international levels to safeguard human health, including through a One Health approach. So you'd read that and you'd think, oh, One Health, people health, human health, and then you go to this. Yeah, there we go.
This one's probably the one that has the most meat. Let's see what this says. Parties commit to promote. Promote. What does that mean? Promote.
Exactly.
For this purpose, each party shall take into account its national circumstances and capacities, take measures to implement policies and strategies.
Yeah.
Promote the effective and this whole document is sort of meaningless from a legal perspective, meaning what does that mean? And who is any one party to tell another party that they aren't doing that?
Right.
Do I just get to do something and say, well, that's what this is for?
Yeah. So zoonotic outbreaks, I'll have to ask Melissa this, but I'm assuming zoonotic is not just human, but that's also animal.
That's animal. Yeah.
There's the chronic disease and killing.
Is the zoonotic when it goes from animal to human?
Yeah, I think so. Which is what's bird flu? Hello, right in the middle of everything. One Health workforce training. There you go. There's more indoctrination of our government employees, and continuing education programs for public health, animal health, and environmental sectors to build Complementary skills, capacities. Yeah. This just opens up, again, this allows for all the NGOs to come in and say, oh, we can do this for you, right? And all of the special interests, and they're the ones that are going to define how this goes, right? And this gives them the in to basically, lobby for what they think that this needs to look like.
So I think it bears further reading and study if somebody's interested. It's a 29-page document. Some people might think that's really long. That's relatively short, I would say, for a legal document.
International standards and guidelines to detect, reduce risks of, monitor, and manage zoonotic spillover and spillback. What the heck is spillover and spillback? In collaboration with the WHO and relevant there you go, intergovernmental organizations. There's your There's your in for the.
Who is that?
That's all your NGOs.
Oh,
that's all your NGOs. Yeah.
Intergovernmental.
Again, what's the definition of it? Or Pfizer? Yeah, Melissa says Pfizer too. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, could be government contractor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So keep the pressure on your legislators, folks. Don't let them buy into this. Oh, it's been watered down. Look at how wonderful it is. It's all warm and fuzzy. It's not.
A plate. It definitely is not warm and fuzzy. Definitely not my.
It will be used as a bludgeon, just like everything else.
Yeah. Well, and this is what I was going to say with the pandemic. It wasn't. I mean, it's my opinion. COVID wasn't a real threat. It wasn't ever a real threat.
No.
And that ranges all the way from, was the virus ever even isolated? Did the virus ever really exist?
Right.
Right.
It was a variation of the flu, in my opinion. I mean, that's we're not saying people didn't die from it, but I mean, it was called a false.
But did they die from that, or the hospital remdesivir treatment?
Right.
That they forced everybody on.
Right. And I mean, if you look at the statistics, and it was a disease that was primarily, would get folks that were older. I mean, it was right. But I mean, we locked the entire world down for something that, didn't affect, and we started pushing it on children and young people and all of this stuff. It was way overblown.
Well, I think the motivation was to get the shots into people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And we've talked a little bit, and I know Todd's covered it a whole bunch, the wireless body area network.
Right.
Those people have, and we probably all do through other means, right? Through other vaccinations we've had in our lives.
Right.
Through our environment, through, through, what they're spraying in the.
And everybody says, oh, it's conspiracy theory. Folks, there's videos from 2012, 2011 of these conferences where they're talking about this. There's that one video of Fauci and whoever else it was saying that this is, what they wanted to do, that, it's there. It's just because you don't think it is, you don't want to believe it is, doesn't mean that you can't, that the evidence that this was engineered, this entire thing was engineered. One way or the other, whether the virus was engineered or whether the whole pandemic itself was engineered. We're not saying something didn't happen. Something obviously happened, but it was not like we started out this podcast. It wasn't an organic thing. It was not organic the way it happened at all.
No, and it wasn't as deadly as they initially claimed it to be. So that was kind of that's also in the back of my mind why they're not going to do another pandemic, because they're not going to be able to do a fake again. And I really don't think they'll do a real one, right? They don't want to risk themselves dying. So I don't think they want to do a real pandemic.
But they're already pushing, 25% mortality on this.
There's no
on the bird flu thing. I mean, it's and they're now the latest thing I saw last night was that they were gonna, were they gonna go in and start quarantining agricultural, like if you worked on a dairy farm, sorry, you can't leave now for however many days. You know, this is a slower rollout, but I think
really, truly, don't comply, folks. I think it's 1,000% BS. It's BS.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well,
but again, it's fake. It's fake. The numbers they're putting out there are fake. It's not a real.
Right. Well, and we know these things can't mutate as quickly as they're saying. Like I said, that they mutate. I mean, viruses are very specific in terms of, you know, where they can survive, and the mutations don't happen overnight. And it's been within a month and a half that it's mutated from birds to cows to humans to milk to, you know, to earthworms. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, just common sense wise, stop and think. Don't get sucked into the fear propaganda again. And I'm just, you know, I'm scared to death that people are, or that I'm not, you know, I don't think as many people are as happened last time, but it's going to be interesting to see you know, what the buy-in, you know, what the percentage of buy-in into this as it goes forward. But I definitely think that's where they're going, and they know they can't do it exactly. Like I said, they sprung COVID on us. I don't think they can do that again. They're going to have to build a foundation for them to create the fear on now, and that's what I think they're doing now. I see them building this foundation. Right.
But yes, I absolutely they're trying, but it's not sticking.
Yeah,
and we're going to make sure that it doesn't stick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Melissa.
Well, hi. Yes, thank you so much, ladies. I enjoyed going through that with you, and I hope everybody else did too. We've got linked down in the description that document we were reviewing together. So if you want to go read it for yourself, go check that out. Check out our other links as well. Please like, share, comment if you liked the content. That's the only way that we can stay active, guys. We're not out here asking for donations. So why not get something in return? Shop with our affiliates, use our links, things like that. So thank you so much, everybody. We are supposed to be having In the Lion's Den coming up next with Dr. Jane Ruby, but we are experiencing some technical difficulties. So if it doesn't start right at 2 p.m. Eastern, it will be at some point today going. So please look out for that live today.
Talking about the bird flu. Good. Yay.
They covered the bird flu really well.
Yeah.
Nice segue.
Yeah. And I just, you know, final thoughts. I don't know if you're going to ask us about final thoughts today, so I'm going to give my final thoughts. Just folks, read these things with discernment, right? Again, look at what's not there said versus what is said. I mean, look at what's said, obviously, but also, again, question who gets to define what that is, and go and look at the definitions. You know, start with the definitions, and then when you see it in the body, you're going to say, wait a minute, I saw that defined here, and then go look at that definition and see how broad it is, see how vague it is, see how nebulous it is. You know, be discerning now in terms of starting to look at these things from a more technical, meaning how can they be enforced? Who gets to interpret it? How broadly can it be interpreted? Is climate change just and the Green New Agenda just defined some way else? One World Health, it looks like it's what, you know, it's in here as. So it's still there, right? So anyway, that's my final thoughts. So Dawn,
thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So, all right. Excellent. Well, thank you, ladies. We will see you next week again on Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you tune in. Thank you, and God bless.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.